My name is Margaret, and I spent 20 years holding the hands of people at the end of their lives. 20 years. That is not a small number when you spend it in hospice. I was the nurse who arrived at 3 in the morning when families could not sleep. I was the one who adjusted the morphine, who spoke the quiet truth that death was near, who learned to recognize the exact moment when someone's breathing changed from living to leaving. I knew more about dying than most people will ever know. I felt confident in that knowledge. I felt in some strange way that I had already crossed through to the other side 1,000 times just by watching. I had learned the signs. I could tell you when someone had 2 days left, when they had hours left. I could read the subtle changes in skin color, the way the breath became more shallow, the sounds the body made as it began to shut down. I had held the hands of dying people through every season of the year, through every kind of belief system, every kind of family situation. I had learned how to sit in silence while people said their final goodbyes. I had learned how to comfort the ones who were left behind, to tell them that their loved one had not suffered at the end, that they had gone peacefully. That is what we say. That is what we hope is true. What I did not know was that watching and experiencing are two entirely different countries. My own dying came on a Tuesday in September. I was at home on my day off, which was rare enough to feel like a small victory. I was making tea, ordinary English breakfast, nothing special. The pain came across my chest like someone had wrapped a steel band around my heart and was slowly, deliberately tightening it. I remember thinking how unlike the deaths I had witnessed this moment was. My patients did not usually cry out. They did not usually fight it. But I fought it. I called 911, and then the world tilted sideways. The ambulance ride was chaos. The hospital was fluorescent and loud. I was aware of my body being moved, of tubes being placed, of voices saying things I did not quite understand. But I was already leaving. Even before the flatline alarm sounded, I was already somewhere else. I found myself suspended in a light that was not like any light I had witnessed in 20 years of hospitals. This light did not come from above or beside me. It came through me. It was not bright in a way that would hurt. It was bright in a way that felt like being known. Like every cell in my body was being recognized and welcomed. I realized I was no longer in a body, or perhaps I was entirely in my body for the first time. The distinction no longer mattered. What mattered was that the light was speaking to me without words, and I understood it completely. The light was telling me that I had been seeing dying backward, all those people I had tended to, all those final breaths I had witnessed. They had not been endings. They had not been suffering persons struggling toward darkness. They had been people learning to become light themselves. The dimming of the body was not a tragedy. It was a transformation. It was like watching a bulb stop glowing because the electricity had been released and was returning to the larger current from which it had come. And it was not loss. It was reunion. It was coming home. I saw this truth projected before me in colors that do not have names, in a way of understanding that required no translation. Every moment of my career, every time I had stood beside someone and wondered if they were frightened, I realized they were not frightened of what came next. They were frightened only of what they were leaving. And when they let go of the people they loved, let go of the world they had known, they discovered what I was discovering now, which is that there is no death. There is only transformation. The light was not the end of consciousness. It was the beginning of a different consciousness, one that was not confined to a single body or a single moment in time. Then I was back. My eyes opened in the hospital room, and there was my daughter standing beside my bed, and the first thing she said was that I had been gone for 4 minutes. 4 minutes. It felt like I had existed in that light for both an instant and a lifetime. My heart was beating again. My lungs were breathing again. And I was devastated to have returned. That devastation lasted for months. I went home to recover, but I was not recovering. I was grieving. I would wake up in the morning and have to relearn that I was still in this body, still on this side, still in a world where people suffered and ended, and I had to help them through it. The knowledge I had been given was burning in my chest, but no one wanted to hear about it. My colleagues avoided me. They had seen me in the ICU, had heard the alarms, had watched the code team work on me for 4 minutes, and now I was different. I was speaking about dying in a way that made them uncomfortable. I was not following the script. I was not pretending that death was the great enemy. I was suggesting something that nobody wanted to hear, which is that we had it all backward, that we were teaching our patients to fear the very thing that would save them. My family thought I had had a vision brought on by lack of oxygen, which is what the medical literature says happens. I read the papers. I knew the arguments. Temporal lobe seizures, hallucinations from hypoxia, dreams from a brain that was not getting enough blood. Everyone had an explanation, and none of them were the truth. But everyone was very comfortable with none of them being the truth. It took me 6 months before I returned to work. I was afraid I would not be able to do it, that I would be too broken, too angry at being pulled back, too full of what I had witnessed to function around people still living in the old illusion. But something strange happened when I returned to my patients. I could see the light in them, not the spiritual metaphor, actually see it. Not see it with my eyes, but perceive it the way I perceive the ground beneath my feet. Every person approaching death carried that light within them already. They were not becoming light. They had always been light, having a temporary human experience. I understood that the universe had not made a mistake. Every soul was exactly where it needed to be, doing exactly what it needed to do, even at the moment of transition. And when I told them this, really told them, without sentimentality, just the plain fact of it, they relaxed. I had never seen dying get easier, but I watched it happen. I watched people whose families had told them to fight, choose instead to flow. I watched pain recede not because of medication, but because the person had realized they were not their body, not their disease, not their fear. They were the light beneath all of it. There was a man named Robert, a retired accountant, who had been in agony for weeks. When I told him that his consciousness was not suffering, that only his body was struggling, that he could let the body go without abandoning himself, his entire face changed. Within hours, the morphine requirement dropped by half. Within a day, he was at peace. He died that night, and his daughter told me he had smiled more in those final hours than he had in months. That smile changed something in her. It changed her understanding of what his death meant. I am 73 now, and I still work hospice, though part-time. I am not the same nurse I was before my death. I cannot unsee what I saw. I cannot go back to the old way of believing that this life is the only life, that death is the enemy, that suffering has no meaning beyond being something to avoid. I have learned instead that this time on earth, this human existence, is precious exactly because it is temporary. We are here not to cling and grasp, but to learn how to love, how to witness, how to release. And every person who is dying is in the process of learning the final and most important lesson. The most important thing I have learned is that death is not a failure of medicine. It is not a tragedy unless we make it one. It is a graduation. It is the soul completing its work in the body and then returning home. When I tell people this, they often become angry. They say I am giving up. They say I am surrendering. But I have learned that accepting death is not giving up on life. It is honoring life by recognizing its cycles. Everything that is born must die. Everything that begins must end. And that is not sad. That is the way it is supposed to be. If you have watched someone die, if you have wondered what they were experiencing, if you have feared your own ending, I want you to know this. There is nothing to fear. There is only transformation. There is only light. And it is already inside you, waiting for you to recognize it. There are people who have documented these experiences, who have studied them, and who can guide you through the understanding of what death really means. One person who has helped me integrate this knowledge is the author of Proof of Heaven, and I encourage you to seek out such voices. What they offer is not faith. It is testimony from those of us who have seen, and seeing changes everything.